Hello, everyone, and welcome to my ACT series. In this series, it's going to be a separate set of videos where I'm first going to go over the introduction of the ACT before breaking down each other section of the ACT. So in today's video, we're just going to go over what exactly is the ACT and how do we prepare for it. So the breakdown of the test, it's 5 sections for the ACT, 4 required ones and 1 optional one. The first section that you're going to take is the English section. It's 75 questions in 45 minutes. So there's a lot more questions compared to minutes, but when we go over ACT English, I'll explain to you strategies to help you work efficiently through that section. Then you have the math section, which is 60 questions in 60 minutes. This is your only section where you have at least 1 minute per question. But again, the math section is divided into like easy, medium, and hard questions. So it's not really going to be exactly 1 minute per question. Then you'll have a 10-minute break before you do the reading section, which is 40 questions in 35 minutes. Again, it's more questions than minutes, and it's reading, but we'll go over in the reading section how it's not as bad as it seems. And then we have the science section, which is also 40 questions in 35 minutes, and it's not entirely based off of rote memorization for science topics. Then you have a 5-minute break after the first 10-minute break between math and reading. And if you are taking the writing section, it's 1 essay question in 40 minutes. My tip for the writing section is do it once because it is definitely important to have it as part of your ACT score. If you get a decent score in your writing section, it doesn't need to be a perfect one or close to, but as long as it's decent, I think you're okay. It's more important to focus on these 4 main sections, which we'll get into in a little bit. When I did the ACT, I did 2 attempts. The first time I got a 34, and the second time I got a 36. So I have a lot of tips for you guys as we're going to go over in each section to help you out to be successful and hopefully get a 36 as well. So your total time is around 3 to 4 hours long. The 3 is if you're just doing 1 through 4, and the 4 hours comes from if you do the writing section as well. So scoring, it's on a curve from 1 to 36. Basically how the scoring for the ACT works is you have section scores, so for English, reading, math, and science from 1 to 36, and then your writing score, and you have an overall composite score, which is your weighted average of your 4 main sections. If for your weighted average, if it's like 0.5 or bigger or 0.75, it would round up to the next number. There's no guessing penalty on the ACT, so you need to make sure you try on every single question to get the best score that you possibly can. And then some main differences between this and the SAT is the material covered. Typically, obviously the ACT has a science section, the SAT doesn't have a specific one. It's more based off of integrating science into like the reading passages. You don't get a formula sheet on the ACT, you do for the SAT, but we'll go over the ACT math in that specific video. And there's more focus on like geometry and trigonometry in the ACT compared to the SAT. Obviously, the speed of the test, that's different. You have 3 out of your 4 main sections here where you have more questions than minutes. But again, once we go over strategies and content on how to be successful in these sections, the speed won't matter as much. And critical thinking, there's more critical thinking on the SAT compared to the ACT. ACT is a lot of straight facts. You do have to do some critical thinking, but it's not as much. In my opinion, I think the ACT is a little easier than the SAT, just in terms of that critical thinking aspect. More of it is more straightforward in the ACT, I believe, compared to the SAT, but both exams are 100% okay for college admissions. So here's some tips and strategies that I have for you all. General, this is just broad. We'll go over specific sections in their videos. So number 1, knowing your content is very important, especially for English and math. You need to know grammar rules for English. For math, there are different topics you need to know, like pre-algebra, coordinate geometry, trigonometry, etc. That's really important to know. You cannot wing this test, guys, unfortunately. And for reading science, it's knowing how to analyze information given to you. Like I said earlier, you don't need to be a science whiz to be successful on this test, the science section, but you need to understand the information that they're giving you. There's a lot more figures and tables and graphs in the science section. Number 2, practice a lot. It's a pretty common tip, but it is very important. You need to do multiple practice tests before test day in addition to reviewing content. Practice tests, typically you want to use from the ACT website, but prep books also help, like Barron's or Kaplan or Princeton Review. It's important to do these practice tests not only for knowing what exactly the ACT could ask, what exactly you need to brush up on, but also the flow of the test, right? It's important to time yourself. See how are you doing when you get to the later sections, like the reading and science section or the writing section if you're taking it. It's also important when you're doing practice tests, you need to figure out what you need to work on to improve. Don't just grade tests and then say, okay, I'm done, moving on to the next test. You need to understand what you need to work on, because if you just keep doing practice tests without improving, your score is not going to improve. So that's one of the biggest things that is very important. Different between my first and second attempt. Geometry, that's a math concept I really am not the best at, or I wasn't the best at. I'm a little bit better now. But I studied on that a lot after I took my original ACT. And when I was doing practice tests, I was made sure to focus on that area so I could make that into a strength to help me get a 36 the second time around when I took my ACT. All right, number 3, pacing is key, right? Like I mentioned numerous times earlier, every section besides math has more questions than minutes allotted. And for math, technically it's 1 minute per question, 1 question per minute. It's important to work quickly, but at a reasonable pace. You don't want to go too fast because then you're going to start missing easy questions and it's not going to help you get a good score. And it's important to leave a little bit of time to check answers or answer questions that you were stuck on. It's not 100% vital for you to do this if you are 100% confident on your first go through that you are sure that that's the answer. But if you want to make sure that you're just making sure you've answered every single question and you're confident in what you're saying, then it's good for you to leave a little bit of time to check answers. But it's not mandatory, because I know if you leave too much time, you might start second guessing yourself, and we definitely don't want to do that. All right, number 4, use other test taking strategies that you've been using in tests. It's not the same as a school test, but process of elimination, going with your gut, that's important. Again, don't use these 100%. Don't just start ruling out things immediately. Make sure it makes sense. It's illogical to rule out answer choices. And if an answer is seriously wrong, if you're really like, there's no way I can justify this, then you can change your answer. At the end of the day, even if it's not an answer choice that you like, if it answers the question, it's the correct answer. So look at it that way. Number 5, do not stress on test day. Obviously, the ACT is very important, especially for high schoolers in terms of college admissions. But at the end of the day, it's only one part of your college application, and it should not be that weight of just, oh my God, I have to do well on this test. That shouldn't be the focus on test day, because that's when you get stressed and it's going to negatively impact you. So you should be with an open mind, just taking the test one section at a time. Don't worry about how a particular section is after you complete it. Just go through the test, take the section, do the questions the best that you can, move on to the next section. Don't at all worry about previous sections. Everything will be okay, I promise everyone. With the tips and tricks and content that I give you in this video series, you're going to be very confident for test day to be successful in the ACT. All right, and then this is just a small one about the science section. I've been kind of reiterating this, but you don't need to know science that well to be successful. You just need to read and understand various forms of data representation like figures, tables, and graphs, being able to understand how to read them, how to figure out relationships. We'll go over that in the ACT Science video. It's like a second reading section, but with visuals, and it's not as word heavy as the reading section. So on test day, what you want to bring: your driver's license or student ID, your registration ticket after you register on the ACT website, number 2 pencils, a calculator, a snack, and a watch. And if you are bringing your cell phone, it needs to be completely turned off. It cannot ring at all during the test, or your test is going to get disqualified. Ideally, you don't want to bring your cell phone, but if you do, just to contact with your parents after you finish the test, it needs to be completely off. Score reports, you're going to get your score in about 3 weeks after you test, and you can send your scores to 4 colleges free of charge before you start having to pay fees. And this is before you test, actually. After you test, if you send a score to a college, it's $18.50, and you can send test scores or super scores. Super scores are basically, they'll take out of all the tests that you've taken for the ACT, they'll pick your highest score in each section and make that into a super score. And also another tool is the ACT information release. This isn't offered for every single ACT. It's offered 7 times a year, But on 3 of them, you have the option to enroll for the ACT information release. This is basically where they will release your tests and your answers and kind of help you understand what exactly you missed. If you do have the option for this on your test day, I would highly advise using it. I know it's $20, but if you didn't get the score that you wanted in your first attempt, it really helps you in terms of understanding what didn't I understand and what can I brush upon if I am taking this test again. And you can order this after you get your test score, so you don't need to worry about ordering it like right away or right before you take the test. All right, so that's just the general overview for the ACT. I'm going to have videos on each particular section, so that way you all will have the necessary confidence to do great on this exam. It is definitely possible for everyone to get a 36 if you work really hard and understand what the ACT is asking. So cannot wait to keep going through the rest of the sections with you all, and I will see you guys in the next video.